During World War II, fire starting was not a casual skill. It was, a matter of survival, concealment and logistics. Matches ran out, lighters failed in cold and wet conditions, and sparks from flint could betray a position at night. Soldiers operating behind lines, partisans, downed airmen, and reconnaissance units needed ways to create fire without relying on fragile tools. One of the least discussed but highly effective methods involved something most people would never associate with ignition: heated stone. This was not primitive guesswork or folklore. It was a controlled technique rooted in physics, patience, and field discipline, and it worked when conventional methods failed. Why World War II conditions forced soldiers to rethink fire entirely. Matches were sensitive to moisture, wind, and rough handling. Even so-called waterproof matches degraded over time. Lighters depended on fuel that evaporated or thickened in cold weather. Flint and steel required visible sparks and repetitive motion, which was risky during night operations. In prolonged engagements or isolation scenarios, redundancy mattered. Soldiers were trained to exploit heat retention rather than sparks, especially in environments where open flames had to be minimized until the last possible moment. How the hot stone method solved multiple problems at once. Stone has a property that metal does not: thermal mass. Once heated, certain stones hold heat for a long time and release it slowly. World War II field manuals and veteran accounts describe using heated stones to ignite prepared tinder without flame or sparks. The stone itself became the ignition source. This allowed fire to be started quietly, predictably, and with minimal visual signature. What types of stone were used, and why selection mattered? Not all stone works. Soldiers learned quickly to avoid damp, layered or river-worn stones that could crack or explode when heated. Dense, dry stones such as granite, basalt or slate were preferred. These stones absorbed heat evenly and remained stable. Selection was deliberate. A stone was tested by gradual warming rather than direct flame shock, ensuring it would not fail when needed. Now let's talk about how the stone was heated without drawing attention. Heating was done during an existing fire or cooking period, not as a separate activity. Stones were placed at the edge of a small fire, buried in embers, or set near heat sources already in use. Once heated thoroughly, the stone was removed using sticks or cloth and stored in soil, ash, or wrapped fabric to preserve heat. This preparation often happened hours before ignition was required. How tinder preparation made ignition possible without flame. The success of this method really depended on tinder quality. World War II soldiers used charred cloth, fungus, dried grasses, wood shavings, or processed fibres carried specifically for this purpose. The tinder was arranged loosely to allow oxygen access, but compact enough to retain heat. When the hot stone was placed directly against or into the tinder, the sustained heat caused smouldering rather than open flame. Once smoke appeared, gentle airflow transformed the ember into fire. Why this method worked when sparks failed. Spark-based ignition relies on brief, high-temperature contact. If tinder is marginal or damp, sparks are wasted. How soldiers use this technique tactically. In concealment scenarios, the stone was often used inside shallow pits, behind cover, or inside ruined structures. Fire could be brought to life gradually, without sudden light. So, how can this technique be applied today with discipline and care? Well, this method remains practical for modern survivalists. The process requires preparation rather than speed. First, select a suitable stone and dry it thoroughly. Heat it slowly near an existing fire until it is too hot to touch. Preserve the heat by placing it in dry soil, ash or wrapped cloth. Prepare high-quality tinder in advance. When ignition is needed, place the stone directly against the tinder and wait for smouldering. Introduce air gradually. This method, you'll find, really prioritizes control over immediacy. Why safety and patience were emphasized in World War II training. Improper stone selection could cause injury. Soldiers were warned never to heat wet stones or sealed rocks. Training stressed slow heating and distance handling. The method rewarded calm execution rather than haste. This discipline aligned with broader World War II survival doctrine, where mistakes often had fatal consequences. What does this technique reveal about wartime thinking? The hot stone ignition method shows how World War II survival knowledge focused on fundamentals. Why this lesson still belongs in backyard wisdom. Modern convenience has obscured how fire truly works. Fire is not created by matches. It is sustained by heat, oxygen, and fuel. The World War II hot stone method strips ignition down to these basics. It teaches patience, preparation, and respect for materials. These lessons remain valuable wherever reliability matters more than speed. If you value practical history that still works when modern tools fail, subscribe to Backyard Wisdom and share this episode with others who believe real survival knowledge is built on understanding, not shortcuts. The past still holds methods worth keeping alive.